Having a baby usually comes with lots of well-meaning advice from our parents and other important people in our lives. But we've now learned that some of these long-held beliefs aren't actually beneficial and can lead to things like shorter naps, struggling to get a baby to fall asleep, misdiagnoses, delayed development, and more. Take, for example, the idea that babies should nap in loud, bright places during the day. The idea is that a baby will then get used to sleeping in that kind of environment, and that will make it really easy to get them to sleep anywhere. This is based on the belief that if you always sleep your baby in a dark, quiet environment, then that's what they'll get used to, and they'll only ever be able to sleep when it's perfectly dark and quiet. This advice might sound logical, but let's look at what we now understand about how your baby's sleep works. Babies sleep when they get tired thanks to something called sleep pressure. Think of sleep pressure as a sleepiness fuel tank. The longer your baby stays awake, the more it fills up, and when it's full to the brim, your baby can't resist the call to sleep anymore. It won't matter whether they're at a rock concert or in a dark, quiet bedroom. When they're tired enough, they'll simply succumb to sleep. In other words, when sleep beckons, they'll respond no matter where they are. So they don't need to be trained to sleep in loud, bright spaces. Their natural sleep drive takes care of that for you. However, just because your baby can sleep in a bright, noisy place, it doesn't mean it's the best spot for a nap. The ideal location for your little one's nap is a cool, dark room that's free from sudden loud noises. Letting them sleep in this type of environment will make it easier for your baby to fall asleep, as well as increase the likelihood that they will have a longer nap. And here's why. Your baby's daytime naps are primarily composed of REM sleep, and REM sleep is a light sleep phase that can be easily disrupted by loud noises, sudden movements, or changes in temperature. So, if your baby is trying to have a nap in a bustling environment with a blaring TV, ongoing conversations, or sudden noises like clattering dishes, it's quite likely that their nap will be cut short. And this also means that the quality of their sleep is going to be poor. Also, from around 6 weeks of age, babies become highly curious about their surroundings, and this constant urge to explore and learn can make it really hard for them to settle into sleep, particularly if they're in a stimulating environment. Between 3 to 5 months of age, your baby's sleep pattern also matures, and instead of cycling between 2 stages of sleep, which was the quiet sleep and REM sleep, they will now start to cycle through 4 distinct stages of sleep: awake, light, deep, and REM sleep. And each cycle typically lasts around 30 to 45 minutes, and at the end of each, when they reach that awake phase, your baby might stir, grumble, or even let out a brief cry. If this happens while they're in a quiet, dark room and they're still tired, there's a pretty good chance that they'll just drift back to sleep, as there's nothing interesting to draw their attention and wake them up completely. Essentially, the dark room tells your baby it's time for sleep, not play. So if you want your baby to have a peaceful, undisturbed nap, a dark room free from sudden loud noises is the best option. And remember, sleeping them in an environment like this whenever you can doesn't mean that they won't be able to sleep in a loud, bright environment when they need to. That sleep pressure will still build to the point where they will fall asleep in those environments when needed. You are not going to train them to only sleep when it's perfectly dark and quiet. One way to gauge how much sleep pressure your baby's accumulated to help figure out when they're ready for sleep is by understanding how long babies typically stay awake between their naps. These are often referred to as wake windows, and they will vary depending on your baby's age. I put together a free guide that shows you how long to expect your baby to be awake for between naps, how many naps to expect, and their total daily sleep requirements based on their age. And you can grab that for free by clicking the link down in the description below this video. Another piece of advice that I often come across is your baby is cold because their lips are quivering or their hands and/or feet are cold. Although this sounds plausible, it's not entirely accurate. You see, in newborns, a quivering lip isn't a sign that they're cold. It's a reflex that's triggered by a sudden noise, movement, or change in posture. So if you see your little one's lip quivering, it's a sign that their nervous system is still developing and not a sign that they're cold. It's also quite common for newborns to have cold hands and feet, but instead of indicating that they're cold, this is simply a sign of an immature circulation system. Your newborn's circulatory system is still developing, and this means that even if your baby's body is at the appropriate temperature, their hands and feet might be cool to touch. Therefore, touching your baby's hands or feet isn't a reliable way to determine if they're cold or not. Instead of relying on these signs, you should look for more reliable indicators of whether or not your baby's too cold. For example, you can check their overall body temperature with a thermometer, or you could gently place your fingers inside your baby's clothing to touch their chest or their back. Your baby's body should feel comfortably warm and dry, not too hot and sweaty, and definitely not too cold. Let's move on to another piece of advice that I'm sure you've heard, and that is your baby is crying because they have colic. Now, colic is a term that we use to describe a healthy baby who cries more than usual. It's not a medical diagnosis, and it's not fully understood why some babies cry more than others. But here's the thing, if we label all persistent crying as colic, we might miss out on detecting underlying issues. There could be a number of reasons why your baby is crying. It might be due to feeding difficulties, an allergy, or even a medical diagnosis. So, if your baby is crying excessively, rather than jumping to the colic conclusion, it would be best to talk to a pediatrician. They can help you understand what's causing the crying and how best to comfort your baby. On the subject of crying, people often believe that all crying is a sign of distress and needs immediate attention. And I can see where this comes from. No one likes to see their baby cry. But babies cry. It's their primary mode of communication, especially because their little brains are still growing and they can't express their needs or discomfort in any other way. Sometimes they might cry because they're hungry, uncomfortable, tired, or they simply don't like something. So it's crucial to remember that not all crying conveys the same message, and believe it or not all crying requires an immediate response. For instance, if you place your newborn on the floor from your arms, they might cry due to the unfamiliar sensation. However, if you just give them a few moments, they may actually settle down and begin exploring their new environment. In this situation, your baby isn't distressed. They're simply telling you that they've experienced something new and different. Or maybe your baby cries at bedtime. This might not mean that they need anything in particular. They might just be really tired, and crying is their way of letting you know that they're ready for sleep. Or your little one might cry out while they are sleeping. And in this situation, your baby is simply crying out because they're in REM sleep, which is that movement-filled sleep where babies typically call out and start to squirm around in their sleep. They do not need you to come in and pick them up at this point. In fact, doing so will actually wake your baby up. Whereas if you were just to wait a few minutes, your baby would likely continue to sleep. So, while it's important to pay attention when your baby cries, it's equally important to understand that each cry may convey a different message. And your task is to figure out what each one means. To help you decode what your baby is trying to tell you, it's helpful to understand newborn cues. These are facial expressions and body movements that your baby uses to express that they're hungry, tired, ready for play, or needing a break. So make sure you watch this video next, where I'll step you through the facial and body movements newborns typically use to communicate with you from their very first day. Once you know what these cues are, you'll be able to correctly respond to your newborn's communication attempts, and this will build a stronger attachment between you both. So make sure you check it out.